What is crack-a-lackin', Hardwood Knocks listeners and YouTube watchers? I am Dan Valley, coming at you without any of my fantabulous co-hosts this time, but figured it'd be cool as the NBA's rumor mill sort of churns on with free agency and trades to go through an article that one of my co-hosts, Grant Hughes at Bleacher Report, wrote about unexpected landing spots for Kevin Durant, coming up with trade packages for that. He also has another one on more popular trade scenarios and landing spots for Kevin Durant with specific packages that if we have time, we'll go through and just see what we think of them. And yeah, I just feel like that's the topic du jour right now. We already covered this, Kevin Durant stuff on a previous podcast. Check out our YouTube feed, podcast feed. I haven't even decided whether I'm releasing this as an actual podcast yet. So how's that if you're listening? But I say, hey, let's go and dive right into this right now. So unexpected trade ideas to get Kevin Durant out of Brooklyn. I think what's interesting and why you write this, and the Bulls are right here, but why you go about it in this way is because Kevin Durant has 4 years left on his contract, 4 guaranteed years, no opt-outs, no nothing. He is 33 years old. I believe he's going to his age 34 season. So if he doesn't want to be somewhere, and given his injury history, there are teams, if they're not on his list, and we only know that Miami and Phoenix are for sure on his list right now, maybe you don't want to take a chance on him, but because there's so much time left on his deal, if you think that you are just able to convince him that this is the right spot, or you don't care, it makes it interesting to go after him. And so that's why I think an exercise like this, where you're going beyond even Boston was mentioned tangentially, going beyond that obvious list. So we start with the Chicago Bulls. The trade idea was DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, Kobe White, 3 first-round picks, Portland's 2023 pick, and then a 2027 and 2029 first, and then a first-round swap in 2028 for Kevin Durant. I think this is the best realistic offer the Bulls could give Brooklyn, just because Zach LaVine already agreed to re-sign, and you're not going to sign and trade him. Part of the appeal here is you want to pair Kevin Durant with Zach LaVine. I think some people will scoff at losing DeRozan and his playmaking, but you have Kevin Durant and Zach LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan just makes so much sense from a matching salary perspective. That being said, I could see a scenario where it makes one, if I'm Chicago, I am pushing for other stuff. Like I want Dalen Terry, I want Ayo Dosunmu for sure. And instead of taking on DeRozan, who has 2 years left at nearly $59 million, maybe you want to take on Vooch's expiring contract instead. And if not that, are the Bulls willing to give you Lonzo and then another salary, or Lonzo and Caruso, just guys who could be rerouted later? So if I'm Brooklyn, I am fighting for two main things here in addition. And regardless of whether you like this package or not, this just includes the Bulls' best trade assets. They can't trade their own pick before 2027 right now because of that Vooch trade. But if I'm the Nets, I don't want DeRozan. I would prefer even Vooch's expiring, or I'm fighting for Lonzo Ball and or Alex Caruso in there. And I'm also trying to get Ayo Dosunmu, who's on just a steal of a deal. And, if that costs you maybe the Blazers' first-round pick in 2023, like, oh, you can get Lonzo, Dosunmu. Making the money work here is so tough. Tell them to keep Kobe White then. But if I can get Ayo Dosunmu, Patrick Williams, and a bunch of picks, and then salary filler that's not DeMar DeRozan along with Patrick Williams, that's the route I'm going. I'm prioritizing one last time picks, Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, and then the large contracts that aren't DeMar DeRozan. And I think the Bulls will, you're left without a point guard if you trade effectively DeRozan, who is your point guard, but LaVine can play make a bunch. And it's the same story if you trade Lonzo and Caruso. I don't know what your defense looks like in that regard. There are ways that you could structure this to where you're not giving up Caruso. It's just Lonzo. You do have to make up quite a bit of money, though. So you leave your defense intact. And if you're keeping DeRozan, he's still functionally your point guard for a lot of the points. That's the route I would go. And I might almost prefer it if I'm Chicago, just because you don't want Lonzo, KD, or even LaVine to have to shoulder too much self-creation responsibility. Though I will say DeRozan isn't that much of a threat off the ball. So yeah, if I'm Chicago, I prefer giving up DeMar DeRozan. If it's this exact package, there's no way to me that you get out of this without including Dalen Terry and Ayo Dosunmu as well. Next team, the Denver Nuggets. This is one of my favorite destinations for Kevin Durant, like just from a basketball fit perspective, in case anybody cares. The Denver Nuggets receive Kevin Durant and Eric Gordon. The Nets receive Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, 3 first-round picks, Milwaukee's 2023, their own 2024 back from Houston, and then the 2029 pick via Denver, that's the first pick Denver can trade of its own, is the 2029 first round pick because of the other trades. Houston gets Ben Simmons and Zeke Nnaji. So let's look at it from this perspective. I am doing this if I'm the Nuggets. I don't care about giving up we'll break it down team by team. I don't care about giving up the 2029 first. Michael Porter Jr., who you hope basically turns into a facsimile of Kevin Durant, not as good, but when you look at the size, the shot making, and the fluidity off the dribble, when he's healthy, you can envision that outcome. But you could get the actual Kevin Durant. I like Eric Gordon in Denver a little bit less now that they have KCP. Also, Jamal Murray's coming back, so you are on the smaller side there. But he's actually pretty good defensively and plays really well off the ball. You can even steal some minutes with him at the 3. You'd probably miss Aaron Gordon a ton. He was your best defender last year by far. You used him at the point of attack. You can sacrifice that to some extent because you have KCP. And you also signed Bruce Brown Jr., so maybe that eases the burden. Again, we're talking about a bunch of smaller guys here, though, so that would be something to consider. But it's Kevin Durant, so you're giving it up. And then the only other player you're giving up is Zeke Nnaji, who's just a really good backup big. I think he can log more time at the 5 than Denver allows him to, but you give up Zeke Nnaji in this deal. So you're giving up for Denver, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, your 2029 pick, and Zeke Nnaji. I know that doesn't seem like a lot to people, but we need to remember that Michael Porter Jr.'s contract feels bad right now. He's guaranteed like $150 million almost, and it could be worth as much as a max deal. He was that good. It was almost a no-brainer decision for Denver to give him that extension. So we tackle this. Let's just go to Houston because the Nets is toughest to justify. If you only have to give up Eric Gordon, who doesn't factor into your future, and then your own that Milwaukee 2023 first, which isn't going to be good, and then your Brooklyn's 2024 pick to get Ben Simmons and Zeke Nnaji, you don't need Nnaji per se, but as a backup big to Alperen Sengun and Jabari Smith Jr., I don't hate it. Usman Garuba's there as well. Ben Simmons, I actually really like on the roster because you have your best players in Paolo Banchero, Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green. They all project to be able to work without the ball. And so if you need to put the ball in Ben Simmons' hands, that's fine. He also gives you more of a floor general than any of the guys that I just mentioned. And then just defensively, he's a monster. And so imagine, the shooting would be awful, but lineups with him and Usman Garuba, Jayshawn Tate could be great. But also just, you could run, you get weird. Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith, and Ben Simmons play super huge with Jalen Green and then whoever else. How do you want to fill that out? With Jayshawn Tate, Kevin Porter? You don't need a point guard in that situation. I want to make that clear because you have Ben Simmons. I think I would do it for them. That Nets pick in 2024, you probably think they suck. And so that's where it gets a little iffy. Would Brooklyn be willing to accept either a different pick or just not the Milwaukee pick? I would do this ultimately if I'm Houston. For the Nets, however, I do think this is clearly I don't know if it's Denver's best offer, but Michael Porter Jr., if he pans out, again, you have a legitimate cornerstone. But I think, and the reports have the Nets wanting this all-star caliber young player. Michael Porter Jr. at full strength is that, but he's had back issues galore now throughout his college career, his NBA career. That's too much of a red flag for me, I think, to take on. You would need more picks, which you can't finagle in this deal because the Nuggets just don't have any more. And if you're Houston, you're not going to give any more up for Ben Simmons, who, by the way, is coming off his own back surgery. I do like Aaron Gordon in Brooklyn. He's still on a movable contract, a pretty good defender on the perimeter. And if you're asking him to play a complementary offensive role, I think he can do that well. It remains to be seen whether that would be an option in Brooklyn because they're not going to have anybody. You assume Kyrie gets traded in addition to Durant. If anyone's wondering why Ben Simmons is being traded as part of this, you can't have two players on designated, rookie extensions basically on your roster at once. Michael Porter Jr. counts as that, and Ben Simmons also counts as that. So you would have to ship out Ben Simmons. The more intriguing, framework for me, is if you believe that Jamal Murray is healthy in your Brooklyn, I prefer him to Michael Porter Jr. And I think you could get away with it if you're Denver by going that route. You did trade Monte Morris, but you have Bones Highland right there. Also, that's another player, if I'm Brooklyn, I'm pushing to have included here, would be Bones Highland. There's no way you get out of a Kevin Durant deal if you're Denver and Bones Highland and Jamal Murray aren't a part of it. But if I'm Brooklyn, I'm probably asking for Jamal Murray instead of Michael Porter Jr., and then I would try and get Bones Highland out of there as well. Can you also get some swaps from Denver? They have a 2028 swap that they could give. They have swaps galore in the years that they don't have first round picks. You can offer swaps. I guess the Nets need first round picks in those seasons, which their first round picks are broken up as well. But Denver can feasibly offer swaps in 2024, 2026, and 2028. So that would be a way to add assets to this. I just think Denver, it gets tough because your two primary trade assets in any Kevin Durant deal would be Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. They're both coming off these monster injuries. But if you can figure out a way, and look, I would trade personally if I'm Denver, I'd give up both of those guys for Kevin Durant, and I wouldn't even think twice. So even if that's an option where maybe it's those two players and a first, and you keep Bones Highland, you keep Aaron Gordon, whatever. I will say, now that I'm misspeaking, I am sort of wondering if I'm wondering if Michael Porter Jr.'s extension doesn't matter here. But regardless, whether you need the Simmons framework or not for this, I don't hate it. I like it for the Rockets. I love it for Denver. I think you need more somehow if you're Brooklyn. And I think Jamal Murray's the pathway, and then Bones Highland, of course, maybe some swaps to getting that. Next team, the Pelicans, another favorite of mine. By the way, I'm reacting to these in real time. I haven't seen these before, so this is fun. The Nets would get Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy III, Dyson Daniels, and 3 first-round picks, a 2023 pick, and then 2024 and 2025, both from New Orleans. They can do that, by the way, because they own the Lakers pick in either one of those seasons. They can decide whichever one. And so that allows them to trade back-to-back. What I think is key here, from the Pelican side, you're getting out of this without trading Zion Williamson. And I ultimately just wouldn't do that for Kevin Durant. I know Zion's been injured. He also just signed an extension, so it's a moot point. You can't trade Zion at the moment. And Kevin Durant's going to be moved before the start of the season. That's out already. But I wouldn't have traded Zion to begin with. We saw him when he was healthy last year for most of the season. He was, or 2020, 2021, however you want to frame it. He was transcendent offensively. And he's so young. I know his prime could technically be more finite given just the way he's built and how explosive he is. That's so anomalous that I don't really even know how to project forward. That being said, part of the appeal would be pairing Durant with Zion Williamson. The cost here is pretty stark, though. Brandon Ingram is a wing, really made a jump as a playmaker, can hit threes off the catch, has a nice mid-range game, some interesting finishing. I thought he played a lot better defensively this past year. I think it was probably his best defensive season of his career. I'm trying to think back to his days with the Lakers, but it's certainly in contention and definitely his best defensive season with the Pelicans. You trade him for Kevin Durant. Trey Murphy III, Dyson Daniels was selected number 8 this past year. That's a good haul for the Nets. Trey Murphy III, if people didn't watch enough Pelicans or enough playoff basketball, he was really good towards the end of the season and in the playoffs. Just a prototypical 3-and-D wing that scales to 3 true positions. And I would even say maybe you could get him to defend more point guards. Dyson Daniels is going to be a monster defensively, maybe positionless even. And he's also a great passer. If you believe the jump shot's going to come along, I actually believe he's one of the guys. There were 2 guys in this draft that I thought people weren't talking enough about as, if everything works, they might be stars. And it was Marjon Beauchamp, and you go, I'm serious. I'm not even, I'm not being snarky, and Dyson Daniels. So Dyson Daniels went high enough that maybe that's not a shock, but this was considered like a draft that had maybe 4 or 5 really star prospects, 6, depending on how you felt about Keegan Murray. So I like that return for the Nets, and you're getting 3 picks. I think the issue here for Brooklyn is that the picks are so imminent. That the Pelicans and or the Lakers, because they're swap rights for New Orleans with the Lakers, so you make New Orleans exercise that swap if the Lakers are worse. They should be fine if LeBron and AD are healthy next year. And then 2024 and 2025 from New Orleans, even if you make it that they give you the Lakers pick that they own as well, those aren't going to be particularly high picks. And so to me, you'd be looking at it as Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy III, and Dyson Daniels are the heart and soul of this deal. I don't know how I feel about that if I'm Brooklyn. I think because Brandon Ingram is so young and in it, I would do it for Brooklyn. Like, just push comes to shove. I don't know if New Orleans has that. Maybe, if Toronto's not giving up Scotty Barnes, if if the Heat aren't going to give up Bam Adebayo, and I know Ben Simmons needs to be moved if Bam Adebayo is going to Brooklyn. If you're running out of those options, if you're clearly not getting even Jaren Jackson Jr., who's injured from Memphis. Like if those players are off the table, you absolutely call about them. But Brandon Ingram's like a legit, Brandon Ingram is just like this really legit building block. So I absolutely would consider that if I'm Brooklyn. The other route you could go though, very quickly is, and also the loss, I think I would do it if I'm New Orleans as well. And even if the asking price is a little bit higher where you want more distant first, I would consider it because CJ McCollum sort of offsets a lot of what you're losing from Brandon Ingram on the offensive end. He's probably a better, mid-range shooter, floater guy, and three-point shooter. I think he's probably a worse passer at this point. It's about net even. He's way worse defensively, so you're losing a lot there. That being said, the Pelicans could go the route of, hey, we'll give you every single pick under the sun that we can give you. And I'm talking like a haul. They could swap it because of the Laker commitments with them. Brooklyn could end up getting Dyson Daniels, Trey Murphy III, and just I would say 5 first-round picks and then maybe 2 to 3 swaps. Like it's workable, that structure. And if you're Brooklyn, what you do is you try to get distant picks that scale past Kevin Durant's contract. So 2000, I would say after 2000, KD isn't a free agent again for another 4 years, and he's under all guaranteed deals. But that's 2026 is when he's a free agent next. That's when in 2025, maybe that Pelicans pick because KD's older. What happened with CJ McCollum by that point? Zion's body, yada, yada, yada. Thereafter is when you want the picks to convey. Use swaps or just take whatever. And then New Orleans can just continue to send back salary. It's a $44 million in KD's money that they have to match. And if you're trying to do that without including Brandon Ingram, Zion, or CJ McCollum, mostly because I don't think Brooklyn has any use for him, you're looking at just stacking every other deal that you have. There's Jonas Valanciunas' $14.7 million, Devontae Graham at 11.6, Larry Nance Jr. at 9.7. That's going to get you probably need one more. If you include, actually, you would get there. Those 3 players plus the Trey Murphy III and Dyson Daniels, that would get you there. There are other things you could do. You have Herb Jones, and maybe that's the premium you're paying here with Brandon Ingram is you're getting to retain Herb Jones. But you have him, you have Jose Alvarado. I would do what I could to keep Brandon Ingram with Kevin Durant because I think Ingram is really, if you're giving up Dyson Daniels and Trey Murphy III, he is mission critical to the defense. And if I am the Pelicans, the 2 things I'm aiming to do are keeping one of Trey Murphy, Dyson Daniels, and Herbert Jones, just because you need that lockdown wing defender that's not Kevin Durant. And I'm not saying Ingram just can't be that guy. He's going to be solid. So I would like to keep ideally 2 of Ingram, Murphy III, Dyson, and Herb Jones, because you do have to think about life after the Kevin Durant trade. I'm not even looking at this from New Orleans' perspective. It's trying to do both. So ultimately with this deal, I think New Orleans would do it. I think the Nets have a right to push for more draft equity that stretches out further. I think the middle ground for 2 teams would be, do the Nets really want Brandon Ingram right now when they're not going to be competitive? Can you talk them into taking more short-term money, Jackson Hayes' salary, and then just showering them with first-round picks in addition to Trey Murphy III, Dyson Daniels? I would almost want at that point, like, take the flyer on Kyra Lewis Jr. Jackson Hayes is about to get paid, so maybe you don't want him, and perhaps the Pelicans don't want to give him up if you're giving up both Valanciunas and Nance, but you can give up one of them and still make it work. That's the beauty of this. The Pelicans have all these different deals. I'd prefer to keep Nance and get rid of Valanciunas when you look at the resulting roster, but you can mix and match with that. So I like the Pelicans as a destination, and I actually think they're the dark horse that could really do something if they wanted to. The Knicks, this is interesting. And that's supposed to be their big move, and they didn't make KD's initial list. The Nets would get RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, Evan Fournier, and 4 first-round picks. 2023 via Detroit, the Knicks' 2023 pick, and then 25 and 27 first from New York. Now, the 23, 25, and 27, those would all be unprotected. The Detroit Pistons 2023 pick is very protected, so that's not going to be a high pick. I don't think this is enough for it. It is probably among New York's best offer, but if I'm Brooklyn, you need to give me another first-round pick. You're including the 2029 pick. RJ Barrett is good, but he's not great, and we need to see him have a more efficient offensive season before we declare him a future star. And he's also about to get paid. He's extension eligible. Obi Toppin's nice. Evan Fournier is a net negative. So if I'm the Nets, I need at minimum another first round pick. And then I probably want Emmanuel Quickly. I think that's how you finish this off. And if the Knicks want to hold on to RJ Barrett, you better be ready to include more swaps, another pick. You could say goodbye to Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickly. So maybe Miles McBride. If you're not including RJ Barrett, I don't necessarily know why Brooklyn does it. I also don't love what are the Knicks with Kevin Durant, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, and Jalen Brunson as like the crux of their core, and then insert, is Cam Reddish playing, or they're still going to have Derrick Rose. Just even if Emmanuel Quickly is still there, I'm just not, doesn't move the needle for me. I think this is probably one of the lower end offers that Brooklyn would need to accept. I guess you could look at it as if you're going to short the Knicks' future because they're routinely, they sort of build themselves up only to fall flat on their faces. They're just such a mercurial franchise. You could probably talk yourself into the 2025 and 2027 picks that are unprotected being huge, but I need 2029 and maybe swaps as well. And then at that point, if I'm the Knicks, I don't know. Kevin Durant going into his age 34 season. I don't love the fit here. It is funny that the Knicks have not been mentioned more. I just don't know where. If your top three guys, look at it that way, are Kevin Durant, Jalen Brunson, and Julius Randle, where does that get you? And that's why you fight to hold on to Quickly or Barrett for sure, without question. Last one, the Sixers. Let's reunite KD and Harden after Harden ran away from the Nets because of Kyrie. I love this. The Nets would get Tobias Harris, Tyrese Maxey, Matisse Thybulle, and 3 first-round pick swaps for Kevin Durant because they have no actual first-round picks to give at this point. I think this is not enough. Tyrese Maxey, I think, might be the single most important or single most valuable non-pick trade asset in the NBA when you're talking about not Kevin Durant, not the team who's selling, but if you're a team that's trying to acquire, you're acting as a buyer, and you need to include something that's going to attract a seller. I actually think Tyrese Maxey is the single most attractive trade asset viewed in those terms. Maybe you feel differently if you think that Scotty Barnes or Evan Mobley would be on the table in Kevin Durant talks. That's fine. I don't think they will be. So there's that to consider. But this doesn't even come close. If I'm Brooklyn to doing it for me. So these are all very interesting trades. I like them, the unexpected landing spots. Where do you think Kevin Durant is going to land? Did you like any of these deals? What do you think about the teams that are actually mentioned? Let us know in the comments. Please subscribe to this channel if you're new. Subscribe to our podcast if you're new. We really appreciate everyone's support here and endlessly love every single one of our followers, subscribers, whatever. Until next time, if you're new here, this is the routine. We leave you with a shout out to the one